Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State! Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host, Nick Pollock, and I am not joined by one of my normal co-hosts tonight, because I'm joined by a much more special guest. And yes, I mean that is deep offense to all of them. But I'm joined by former Nittany Lion, former Mississippi State Bulldog, former New Orleans Saint, former Carolina Panther, and current Calgary Stampeder, Mr. Tommy Stevens. Tommy, what's up, man?
What's going on, Nick? Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you. I know we were just talking before, but I know, like, I've followed your career obviously all through Penn State. We talked even when you were a recruit. I did a couple interviews with you back when I worked at Black Shoe Diaries over at SB Nation. So, we've been following you for a long time. We loved watching you at Penn State and loved following your career. And it's awesome to see you doing well.
I appreciate that, man. I do remember, like I said, remember the conversations that I had when I was, I guess I would have probably been like 17, 18 years old then. And it's, time really flies. Time flies. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I'm thankful, like I told you before, thankful for, for your support of me throughout the years and, excited to, be able to sit down and talk to you a little bit.
Yeah, of course. And I think, as I just alluded to, your recruitment, it was super interesting. Like, even going back now, your whole recruiting class in general was one of the first recruiting classes that, I covered personally. But even to this day, it's one of the more interesting ones in general. And just even thinking about, specifically the quarterbacks, there was this massive domino effect that happened with the quarterbacks in your class. And there's even more than I'm going to reference here, but, some cliff notes here. You had Ricky Town, originally committed to Alabama, then he flipped to USC. So then you had Blake Barnett, who's committed to Notre Dame, flipped down to Bama. So then you had Brandon Wimbush, who was committed to Penn State, flipped to Notre Dame. And then you flipped from Indiana to Penn State. Were you aware of kind of all that going on at the time?
So, yes, I think that there ended up being a couple more down the road. Like I think Indiana went and got like NC State's guy and, I was committed to IU at the time. And, it was strange. I didn't really know, I guess before I was directly involved, I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I guess I kind of followed what was going on between, the quarterbacks in my class, but that's pretty much exactly how I remember it. I mean, everything was kind of, like you said, a domino effect. And, it was actually funny. I was also being recruited by Notre Dame once Blake Barnett left, being from Indiana, Indianapolis, not too far from Notre Dame. So, on my visit was also Brandon Wimbush on his official visit. And so I was able to meet Brandon then, talk to him, kind of figure out what was going on, I guess. And so I actually, I guess in a weird way, I mean, I didn't expect Penn State to call me, but in a weird way, I was prepared for them to call me just based off of how it went down. You know what I mean? And so once I found out Brandon was going to commit, it was funny how it worked out. I don't know I think Brandon committed on the spot or one way or another made it clear to the Penn State staff that he was probably going to Notre Dame. And so I'm leaving the game with my mom and maybe a couple of my high school buddies, because we grew up Notre Dame fans being from Indiana.
Yeah.
And so I kind of took it as an opportunity to bring some of my high school teammates to the game.
Sure.
It was a real cold, rainy game against Navy. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was miserable to be at. And so we're walking to the car, and I get a phone call from Ricky Ronnie, who at the time was the quarterbacks coach at Penn State. And I didn't answer it. And I remember thinking, like, man, these guys, like, they're trying to pull like a fast one on me. Like, they don't think that I know what's going on here, whatever. And as you know, James Franklin's very, very good at recruiting. And so, maybe the next week, following week, Coach Ronnie is at my game playing against, a team that's in Central Indiana, pretty good team. And, next day they offer me. And so it's like, dang, like things happened really, really fast within, a couple of weeks spans. And obviously at that point, Brandon had decommitted and committed to Notre Dame and they needed a guy. So, in a weird way, I got very lucky. I like to think that, I earned a lot of the opportunities, but, timing is important as anything. And the way that it worked out, I just happened to be the next guy on the list. And I think I ended up being a little bit better than most people thought. And so I was very early in my quarterback career, I guess you could say. I'd only been playing quarterback for like 2 years at that
Hmm.
point. And so, I had a lot of, I was definitely by the definition a wild card, I guess you could say. A project would be better. I was very, I mean, looking back, man, um, I thought that I was a lot better than I was. And so I'm able to look back and see like where I was then. I'm like, man, my mechanics are awful. Like if I just knew so much, a lot of the things, if I knew half of the things that I knew now back then, I mean, I would have probably been a couple more stars. But it's just that's how it works, man. You go back and watch some of that stuff. It's pretty cool to reminisce on it.
I was reading back on some of our old interviews, and one of the quotes that had me laughing was something like you were like, yeah, I realized I need to start to get a little bit bigger, otherwise those Ohio State linebackers are going to rip my head off when I get there.
Yeah, ended up being downhill on a couple of them. So the weight thing wasn't too bad for
Yeah,
me at least.
kind of along those lines. I mean, just being that you're significantly removed from it at this point, is there anything that you would have done differently, like when you were a recruit? Like, do you feel pretty good about the way you went about the process and all, or
Yeah, I think things worked out exactly how they were supposed to.
yeah?
I think that I was supposed to be at Penn State. I'm thankful that I was able to go to Penn State, get a world class degree from a very fine institution. So, man, I had as good of a college experience as I could imagine. I mean, as you know, Penn State's such a special place to a lot of people, and it'll always hold a special place in my heart. I mean, I'm very thankful that things did work out the way that they did. Um, you know, lots changed as far as like the recruiting
Hmm.
landscape, college football in general. A lot of things have changed since I guess what would that be 7, 8 years ago. And so looking back to how things were then, I think that myself and my family and my high school coaches, administration, I think that we handled things the right way, and I don't think that I would change anything.
Awesome. Well, and speaking of Penn State, then, so you committed to Indiana on June 4th of whatever I guess that would have been
Been
2014.
20. It would have been 2014. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you visit Penn State October
Yep.
24th. You flip to Penn State officially on November 10th.
Yep.
During that visit, because you had already talked to the coaches beforehand, like you said, Ricky Ronnie had reached out to you. When you went on that Penn State visit, did you kind of already have it in mind that you were thinking about flipping, or were you still pretty committed to Indiana at that point?
So I'd like to. I mean, I was very committed to Indiana, I guess, up until the point where I started getting opportunities that I didn't have before I made that decision. And
Hmm.
so, it's kind of just a bad part of the business, unfortunately. You know what I mean? Like, and obviously, like transferring is a lot different now, and there's a lot more lenience to being able to leave a university to go to a different place. But back when like I said, only a short 8 years ago, it wasn't exactly like that. And so, um, I didn't feel good about decommitting. I didn't want to decommit. Just because I feel like I've always been a very loyal person. I've been taught that from a very young age. But talking to some of the guys that I was able to meet on the recruiting process, guys from different teams, guys that have that were older than me, that came out of my high school that went to college places. They always said like, look, man, like it's a business. It's like it's a game, but it's a business. And at the end of the day, these coaches are going to do what's good for or what's best for them and their families. You got to do what's best for you and yours. And so, I kind of took that as like, look, like nothing's going to stop a coach from taking a better job, and as they should. And I think that they should do those type of things, and I think that I should as well. And so, Penn State and Notre Dame, like I already kind of said, were not options before I committed to Indiana. And I was able to go see those places. but on my visit to Penn State, I actually going to backtrack a little bit because again, with the whole timing thing that I was talking about, a lot of things fell into place right for me just for that to even happen because I'm in the middle of my senior season. So the day after the game that Coach Ronnie came and seen me was the day that they offered me.
Hmm.
So like this is the first time that I'm actually gonna, I guess this is the first time that it kind of popped in my mind, like, okay, like maybe I need to, or not maybe, I need to, see if this is a better opportunity for me,
Hmm.
and the same day that Penn State offered me was the same day that we found out, what it was like the playoff selection show for Indiana high school football. And so we get a first round bye, which to my knowledge has never happened before in school history. We get a first round bye for the playoffs. So it's like, all right, well, there's a weekend to go take an official visit, which I hadn't done. I hadn't even taken an official visit to Indiana.
Oh, wow.
So I had never taken an official at that point, and this ended up being the only official that I ended up taking. But I'm like, okay, like, I have a weekend to go see. Because the last thing I wanted to do was be a distraction. We had a good thing going. With the high school team, we were, I want to say, like 10-2. We were having a really, really good year, making a possible push to win a state championship, and I didn't want to be a distraction to my teammates. And so
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, well, here we go. I've got a weekend to go see it. Let's see if they have a home game. And it just so happens to be the whiteout against the eventual national champion, Ohio State, who we almost beat in, double overtime. So, I mean, it was a match made in heaven. It worked out perfectly, obviously. And so, but on my visit, man, as anybody that's ever seen the whiteout, it sells itself. I didn't grow up a Penn State fan. I mean, obviously, I knew the national prevalence that Penn State had, and the type of program that it was. But it wasn't like I was a diehard Penn State fan. And I showed up on campus, and I mean, I immediately fell in love with the place, and it's the rest is history. Obviously, it's anybody that's seen campus, anybody that's been there. I've never heard anybody say any bad things about it. So it's a beautiful place. I love it. It's been a long time since I've been there. I miss it. I would like to eventually get back someday.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that for sure. Penn State. I applied to Penn State. It's not where I wanted to go. It just kind of my advisor was like, "Hey, you seem to like big schools. You like sports. That's not that far. You should give it a shot." But
Yeah.
ultimately, it was further away than Rutgers, and I didn't really want to go to Rutgers. No offense to Rutgers, it was too close. And then
Yeah.
Wazoo, Washington State, where my mom went, was a bit too far. So we drove
Hmm.
over to Penn State and walked around the campus. I was like, "Damn, this is it. This is it."
It's awesome, man.
It's
It's an
easy to
awesome
fall
place.
in love with it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, what was so? I know you mentioned how hard it was to decommit from Indiana. Just like what? I don't just tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what is that like to have to call? Kevin Wilson the head coach at the time? Then
Yep.
what was
Yep.
it like to just make that call? And what was that conversation like?
I mean, obviously for 17-year-old kids, not easy. Looking back, I think that I handled it about as well as I possibly could have. Um, but I remember exactly where I was. I remember the phone call like it was 30 minutes ago.
Mhm.
I called Coach Wilson, talked to him, and he was very respectful to me. I'm pretty sure they probably saw this coming, I guess, but you know they were very good to me, my family. I honestly didn't talk to Coach Wilson for very long. He sent me over to would have been Coach Johns, who's the offense coordinator, quarterbacks coach, who I had I guess, a better relationship with, and so that part was a little bit more difficult, obviously.
Yeah.
Explaining to him, obviously, they wanted me there, so they didn't, see it the same way that I did, and it's tough on a 17-year-old kid, so. But that's how it goes. It's just it's a part of growing up, and um, I thought that, and I still do, that I made the best decision for me. And it wasn't the first difficult phone call that I ever had to have. I mean, I remember when I first committed to Indiana, I called every single coach that either offered me or that I had talked to. I called everyone, let them know what my decision was going to be before I posted anything. I mean,
Wow.
I think that we handled things the right way. And so, even if it wasn't the easiest thing to do, it was the right thing to do. And so, I'm still happy with how things went down. And, most it actually ended up working out because most of those coaches that I had either talked to in the recruiting process, um, you know, some of the guys like Coach Parker, for example, who ended up being at the receivers coach at Penn State for a little bit. He was at
Hmm.
Purdue when I was in high school. He ended up taking the offensive coordinator job at West Virginia. He offers my little brother, who's a senior in high school now, so he offered him to West Virginia. Now he's at Notre Dame, and so like there's a lot of different cases that like that of these coaches that I had built a relationship with over the recruiting process that I think since we handled it the right way, we were very respectful. They were still open to recruiting, my high school and, my eventual, my little brother. So, I'm very thankful for that as well.
That's awesome. I think that's something that a lot of, because when guys flip, decommit, whatever, there's for all the, the positive comments you'll get equally as many comments from random people on
Oh
Twitter
yeah.
saying like, oh, do you even know the meaning of the word commitment? Yada, yada. I think that's something a lot of people
Yep.
forget is that, I get it. Like college football, it almost seems like its own little world in the way. And you forget that you're talking to a 17-year-old kid, and you forget the fact that they, for as angry as you might be about them not coming to your school now, they just had to make the most difficult decision probably that they've made in their life to this point. That's tough.
Absolutely.
That's tough.
Absolutely.
So to flip it over to happier things, then let's talk about your time at Penn State, which was awesome. And I think the first thing I want to focus on is just the relationship that you had with Trace, because you
Sure.
guys, to this day, probably still one of, if not the most dynamic quarterback rooms Penn State has had. I think when you consider just how successful you both were, how athletic you both were, how many different things you could both do. But just tell me about, that relationship that you guys had.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't, and I mean, really, I guess you could attest to, my entire time at Penn State. I didn't know Penn State or Penn State football without Trace. Obviously, he was there. He had been there for a semester. Because I'm pretty sure he didn't, or maybe he did early in role. I can't remember. But he had been there for whether it was a year or a semester more than I had been. So Trace taught me a lot of things, and I credit Billy Fessler a lot for those two kind of taking me under their wing, kind of showing me how things are done in a different way of leadership. Because obviously Christian Hackenberg was there, and he kind of had like the top dog mentality, and obviously as he should have. I mean, he had earned that right, and so and even just because he did, like it wasn't ever anything negative. I wouldn't say like me and Christian still have a very good relationship. I was kind of like I talked about being at Mike's wedding. I remember having like a 2 hour long conversation with Christian, just chatting it up because I hadn't seen him, talk to him in a long time, and he was very good to me. And so, but I mean, that's the thing that I'm probably most thankful for, and not even just like our quarterback room. I mean, obviously, if you look around the country, I would like to believe that a lot of people have good relationships in the room, but it's tough, man. It really is. Just obviously, one guy can play, and being competitive people, it's tough. It's tough to continue to build and to have a great relationship, but it's so important, man. It's so important, and that's a lot of the reason why I feel like it was able to work between us because we were constantly trying to make each other better. We were constantly, just working, man, just working, working, working. And I think, uh, I was able to push Trace, obviously, to. I'm not going to sit here and try to take credit for the things that Trace did, but I think pushing him every day, and it's not even just me. I mean, if you look, like if you take the 2016 team that won the Big Ten, went to the Rose Bowl. I mean, we had depth at every position, man. We had Chris Godwin as the X, and Jawan Johnson was pushing him. I already talked about Trace and myself. You had Miles Sanders pushing Saquon. You had, just constant, or not constant, but just a very long list of talent. We had so much talent on that team, and I think that was, and it's still, man, still the most fun that I've ever had in the football season. That team, it was just the team, man. It was just the relationships, the way that we felt about each other. I mean, it didn't feel like it was like, oh man, we got to go practice. Like we enjoyed being there. We enjoyed being around each other. And I think that is much, much more important than talent, is as crazy as it may sound. I mean, I will take that guys that, that care about each other, that don't want to let each other down. Those player-driven teams are by far the most impactful. And like I said, man, I'll never forget the way that season felt. I mean, obviously it helps when you're winning, and the way that we were winning. It was such a cool thing to be a part of, man. And anybody that was either a part of the program or was supporting us during that time, can definitely relate to how special it was. It was a really good year.
It was certainly fun to watch. And that was the first year that we actually had started Roar Lions Roar at this point, because we had split off from SB Nation. So 2016 was that first full year that we covered Roar Lions Roar. And yeah, it was a hell of a year for it to start. I mean, but not even just football. Between the football team, you had the hockey team winning the Big Ten championship. You had the wrestling team winning the Big Ten championship and a national champion. It was special. It was quite a year.
It was a special time.
It was a lot of fun.
And I believe who was that wasn't the year that the Eagles won the Super Bowl, was it?
Oh man.
It may have been the next year. I can't remember.
Yeah, I feel like they
felt
won
like there
in
was
17.
Yeah. They may have, but it may have been February of 17, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's true.
Like
they
were always tearing. They were always on College Ave. They were always, ripping the streetlights. It was just another week. It was another week on campus. They were just ripping down the streetlights. And man, you're right, man. It was a special time. It was a special time for sure.
That was a really cool time. So you mentioned, obviously, only one guy can play quarterback. You were in an interesting position in that regard, because you had a lot of opportunities to get on the field otherwise, because you were there as the wildcat, or I guess they had started calling it the lion position at that point. Or maybe that was started in 2017, whenever it was.
It's for the bowl game. It was for the bowl game of the Fiesta Bowl, so it would have been the end of 17.
Okay. But regardless of what it was called, you found your way on the field a good amount.
Mm-hmm.
Was it, in a way, was it tough, like in practice, working on kind of those sorts of things instead of quarterback? Because, I have to imagine that any time you spend doing something else, not playing quarterback, you kind of in the back of your mind thinking, well, my chances of actually playing quarterback are probably going down a little bit. But just like, what was it like preparing for that role?
So I think that we did a really good job of the way that I guess we managed it. It all kind of started, like I said, 2016, where at that point, it had been a very long time since I played in a football game. And, the red shirt rules were different. You weren't allowed, not that I would have even been ready. I was not ready to play as a freshman by any means. But, everything was different. I hadn't played in a game. I remember I had a reverse timer in my phone. And it was just like counting the days that it's been since like I had been tackled. You know what I mean? Like it'd been forever. And I guess anybody that's kind of watched me play, or I always played defense. I was always a defensive guy. My dad played linebacker. Like I already mentioned, my little brother, he's going to Virginia Tech with Pry. He's going to play outside backer, D end, whatever, because he's about as big as me right now. So he's a little bit bigger than what I was when I was in high school at 17. So, I guess I come from a defensive family. I guess you could say, like, my people are hard nosed, tough. Blue collar type people, and so I grew up, I guess, loving contact. I mean, that's kind of how I knew football, which is obviously not the most common thing to hear from a quarterback. So I missed it, man. I missed being tackled, and eventually got to the point where we've been right around the time where I think we had just beat maybe Minnesota, or right around that time before we kind of blew up, right? And so I remember I went to Jomo, Coach Moorhead's office, and I was like, look, like I'm going insane here. Like I'm glad that I guess I can't even say that I'm glad we were winning. We were like 2-2, 4-4, wherever we were. I wanted to help. That was really what it came down to. I wanted to help in some sort of capacity. So I'm like, man, like if I'm not going to help us out on offense, like let me do something on special teams. Like let me go run down on kickoff. Like I know that I can help somehow. And I kind of like plead my case, right? And I'll never forget the first thing he says. He's like, well, bud, listen here. You're not running down on kickoff. That's not happening. And so that was the first thing he said to me. So I'm just like, He's like, but, I've got some things that are in the mix here that we can, kind of start to experiment with. I think that you can help us do some things. And, eventually that was kind of how, this package formed, I guess. And so
Oh,
we unveil it against Iowa in the 2016 game where we were just we were running the ball like crazy. I think we ran for like something crazy that night. It was either 500 or 600 yards, something ridiculous. I guess it wouldn't have been 600, I don't think, but it was something insane. We were running the ball for crazy amounts of yards, and so we're up like whatever 41-14 or whatever, and they do the jet sweep that has become to most people like my most famous play, which happened to be my first play. And so, from there, it was, I was thankful for it all. Obviously, I wanted to be helping, I wanted to be playing, but like I already mentioned, man, that team was so stacked at every position. We had a lot of good, skilled players, obviously, and up front, we were pretty good too. And I remember we had, in order for me to come onto the field, one of the running backs would have to come off, or Mike Gesicki would have to come off the field.
mhm.
And so both of those guys, both those running backs are NFL starters. Obviously, Mike is an NFL starter, so they had to take one of those guys off the field in order to get me on the field. And so, I was thankful that they continued to find ways for me to help out. And I think at first it was kind of a thing that would just, I think in their minds they just wanted to keep me happy, but it actually ended up being a weapon for us. And so, obviously I was thankful for that.
Yeah, so I think that to me, I think it says a lot about how the coaches viewed you and viewed your ability to help the team, because like you said, like no matter what the formation was, they're taking off an NFL caliber player, which you went to the NFL too, like you are also of that caliber. But like that said a lot about how they viewed you and viewed your ability to help the team. And I know for me, looking back on what you did in that role, the run against Iowa was easily my favorite. But I'm curious, what were like some of your favorite moments, either from playing that role or when you actually did get to play quarterback as well?
It's hard to pick one, man. It's hard to pick one. I mean, obviously there was so many different moments at Penn State that I really enjoyed. The first touchdown against Iowa was obviously very special. It was my first college touchdown. Um, I didn't score in the Big Ten game, but being home in Indianapolis on what would have been, let's see, that was 2016. So that was like the sixth year. It was December 3rd. So it's the 6th year anniversary of my best friend dying.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, like, obviously a very special night for me as well, and being able to win, and a lot of emotions that way as well. And so, um, and then I think about another run against Iowa that we played, and this is, I guess this would have been 2 years later in 18 when Trace gets hurt. And I've kind of talked about this a little bit. And I remember, obviously I ended up staying when I could have left for that 18 season. And it was a tough year on me, man, because my production kind of went down. I wasn't playing a ton. My foot was broke the entire year. And so, I broke it in spring ball basically right after I announced that, or once I made the decision that I was staying, I break my foot like the next winter workout. So it's just like
Brutal.
very annoying, right? So I have surgery, then come back, I break the foot again, in fall camp. And so, this is like 2 weeks before the opener. So we're like, man, like we're kind of stuck here. Do we want to have surgery again? Do we want to, just see what we can do? And I knew if I had surgery, I was going to miss at least half the year.
Mhm.
So I'm like, okay, like I'll try to play with it. And so we gave it a couple weeks, gave it like 6 weeks from time, and that put me at like week 4 or 5, whatever it was. We ended up playing Ohio State. It was my first game back, and basically just tried to grit it out, and just kept making it worse and worse and worse. And but anyway, so Trace gets hurt for the first time. I mean, obviously he'd been banged up a few times, but Trace had never laid there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Trace is very, very tough dude. Took some bombs, took some bombs of shots. Like I remember TJ Watt pile drived him in the middle of the logo at Lucas Oil, like the first or second play of the game. And I was like, holy, shit. It's no other way of putting it. And so I remember grabbing my helmet, and sure enough, 9 gets up, and so very very tough dude. But to see him lay there, I was like, man, like it's kind of a weird, eerie feeling. You know what I mean? Because obviously here's Trace, my friend, who's hurt that I feel upset about, but at the same time, I've got a job to do, and in the grand scheme of things, I mean, all these things are running through my mind. Um, and during like this TV timeout where they're trying to get Trace off the field, and I remember thinking like, man, like this is it. This is why you waited. This is why you stayed. This is why you didn't transfer. Like these are all the different um, reasons why. You know what I mean? And so, because in my point, or in my view, I thought that Trace was going to be out for a significant amount of time. Obviously, with him continuing to get up time and time again, and they had to carry him off the field. And I'm thinking, okay, like here we go. And so the touchdown that we scored. The next series down there on the goal line where I run it in and kind of like run through the linebacker. That one was special because I felt like boom, I've arrived. You know what I mean? Like I've done a lot of things for Penn State at this point, but like this was like my moment. You know what I mean? And we come back out after halftime. Trace is fine and ends up playing, and it's just kind of like the lights get cut off on that, but. That was tough on me after that, but I think that adds to the significance of how that felt for me, because it was like, man, like this is it, like it's time to play, and I felt like I stepped up to the challenge and kind of got us back into that game, because about everything that could have possibly go wrong at that moment had gone wrong. I mean, we had like a punt block, they faked a punt. I mean, they were up like 17-3, I think. And the number one player in passing yards, passing touchdowns, completion percentage, you name it, every passing category was not moving, and so, being able to get down there, get a touchdown I think we had 7, so it would have been like 17-7. So we score, and then we kick the field goal and end up tying it before the half. And I felt like we were rolling, man. We were rolling, and then obviously Trace ended up being fine. We ended up winning the game. But yeah, that one was pretty special to me as well.
That's awesome. You mentioned, we're going to talk about the transfer decision in a second, and it kills me because I love a good transition, but I'm going to forelay it for just a second because there's one more thing I want to ask about specifically from your time at Penn State. So, I think it was during the 2017 season. So I'm actually we used to make shirts for Roar Lions Roar, and one of those shirts was our Tutties shirt. And it did not go unnoticed that it made it onto the play card. I think it was 2017. And now me being very ignorant, not understanding like the specifics of how the play cards work or anything. But was there do you remember what the significance was of the Tutties shirt logo?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to get anybody in trouble here.
I don't think they use it anymore, so I think we're safe.
They don't use it anymore?
I don't think so. I haven't seen it.
It didn't mean anything.
Oh.
It meant absolutely nothing. None of the stuff meant anything, but we just held it just for people to think, okay, I wonder what that means. Like none of it. So really what came down to was we just thought of like the funniest stuff that we could put on that board in the quarterback room. So I'm not really sure how that one ended up, but I remember we had like a Step Brothers picture, like anything, like we had like a goldfish. We had 2 goldfish in our quarterback meeting room, Big Dog and Little Dog. And, God rest their souls. The Big Dog just passed away not too long ago. It was tough on the quarterback room. We got a text from Jomo. But, yeah, tough break. But I remember we had a picture of the goldfish up there. It was, we had a lot of fun with it.
That's
but
awesome.
Yeah, didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything at all.
That hurts to hear a little bit, but I'll survive.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it held significance though. I'm sure you weren't the only one that noticed it. And we had would have been like 16 different cards. We had 2 giant poster boards front and back with like 4 on each one. So I'm sure somebody probably went deep diving into the significance of those and don't know what they would have found, but
honestly, I'm surprised that's something that we didn't do. That sounds right up our alley.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the transfer portal. First of all, I assume, being as somebody who flipped his commitment, ended up transferring, I assume you're in favor of the way the transfer portal is now, a little bit more free.
Yeah, I mean, It's weird, man. It's weird. Like I said, the dynamic and the landscape of college football is a lot different now.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with all this NIL stuff that's going on too, that I'd never really took part in, so I
Yeah.
can't really speak to that. But man, I think that there should still be a little bit of regulation to it. I really do, and it might be unpopular.
I don't
But
think you're alone in that opinion.
I do agree, and that's not even just with the transfer portal. That's with all the NIL stuff. Because I mean, man, like think about how much college football has changed in the last 2, 3 seasons alone.
Yeah.
So it's only going to continue to change. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to end up turning into. Who knows? But I do think that it's a good idea because I can actually play to both sides of it. Because like I already mentioned, I was thinking about leaving in before the 18 season,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no transfer portal at that point. So like we were manually doing the transfer portal, I guess you could say. So we kept it low. We didn't, and this was obviously in house, right? Like I let the coaches know what I was going to be doing. Basically what it came down to was, again, kind of like I said, if I was going to find a better opportunity somewhere, they would, I mean, at least that's what they said, but they said that they would have, pushed it with, they would want the best for me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's kind of cliche of what the college coaches are supposed to say, but, we kind of looked around and we basically, luckily for me, I had a very, very good high school coach that knew kind of what needed to happen, or he understood how things worked, right? And he kept relationships with a lot of these coaches that he's had for many years, and basically what we did was he was calling around, right? So like let's use, I don't know, what's the first school that you can think of that's not going to be. It could be anybody. You said Washington State.
Sure. Yeah, let's
for
go
example,
Wazoo.
right? Let's
Yeah.
use Washington State, which actually, ironically, was one of the options, but I don't
Oh,
think I've
wow.
ever said that before. But let's use Oregon. Let's use
Okay.
Oregon, for example. Oregon did not call. So Oregon, if we had some kind of tie with Oregon or a phone number of any sort, if my high school coach had that, he would reach out to them to find out whether or not they were interested in a possible transfer quarterback, whatever, right? And if they were, he would then report back to me, okay, hey, like you need to get your basically your waiver to speak to Oregon. And so I would then, go to basically the upstairs people at Penn State, the administration, and be like, hey, okay, I need to get cleared to talk to these guys, like compliance wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it would take like 3-4 days before I was able to, get everything approved. It's super annoying, right? Just because, and whereas the transfer portal will allow you to get immediate access to, to anybody, so we kind of went the round or the long, obviously it was legal, but it was tough, but, it was kind of annoying in a sense of like, okay, we got to talk to these guys, and then if Penn State doesn't want me talking to them, they can block it. Like it was a weird deal, man, and they never ended up doing that. But at the same time, I never ended up trying to transfer to a team in the Big Ten East. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't that either. So I never know or never. I guess I didn't talk to any of those teams anyway. I didn't. I wasn't going to do that. I didn't want to do that. But it would have been interesting to see how that would have went down. But that was the early days, early ideas, the origins of the transfer portal, in my opinion, was me basically kind of finding my way through it.
So were you obviously? So before you tweeted out the Wolf of Wall Street gif, which still perfect use of it, beautiful. Were you?
I do believe that I was first to do that, by the way.
I think you were. I really do think you were.
I think I was too, because I remember talking about it in the, at this point, all of the guys that, I remember Mike and Deshaun Hamilton were at Penn State for whatever reason. And I was telling them that I was, officially returning or whatever. And they were like, well, how are you going to announce it? I was like, I don't know. And the night before, I'd actually watched The Wolf of Wall Street, which is, my favorite movie. I love the movie.
Great movie.
And, great movie. And I was like, well, what would be good is if I posted this. And like everybody around were like, dude, that's like, you're not going to do that. Like, no way you'll do that. And I was like, I mean, why not? It'll be really funny. And I mean, it was great. I ended up having to take it down, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
it was great, man. It was people were fired up about it.
I think we can officially state for the record right here on the podcast that Tommy Stevens was in fact the first to use it for an
I think so.
announcement.
I think so until proven otherwise.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
believe that it was me. And anytime anybody ever does it, somebody tags me in their video saying that I did it first too. So
There you go.
it's kind
That's
of
all the
a
proof you
funny
need
way of
right
doing it
there.
too.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So
So then obviously year after you did end up transferring. First question, if Trace had left, would you have stayed?
you're saying the year before?
The year before, yeah.
Like,
Sorry, to go back to the year before first. Yeah.
yeah, I probably would have stayed.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, I don't think it would have been a discussion at that point.
Yeah.
I think that I've never really thought about that, but yeah, I probably would have stayed.
And then to go to the actual decision to transfer, one, how many places did you actually consider, or was it kind of like, Coach Moorhead was down there, Mississippi State, obvious familiarity, easy transition? Like, was it pretty simple at that point, or were you considering multiple options?
I went into the portal not knowing whether or not Jomo, because obviously I wasn't able to talk to him before. So, I mean, it was kind of like jumping over the wall that you don't know what's on the other side, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't know whether or not they were going to be there to, I didn't know if they would want me. I didn't even really know a whole lot about their situation. But I didn't go into the portal just to go to Mississippi State with Jomo. Like, that wasn't the decision why. And so I was going to find a new place to play regardless. But yeah, I took. I guess I lied earlier saying that I only took one official, but one official in high school, right?
That's different.
So
Yeah.
I got a whole new set of officials going into the portal. So I think I took four. I believe I took four different officials. I went to Miami of Ohio, which was pretty close to home. Went to Kentucky. Went to Mississippi State, and I believe maybe Illinois. I believe it was Illinois. I took those four officials, and obviously the familiarity with the system. Playing in the SEC West against the best of the best. That was a lot of what went into my decision. Being able to step into the room and know more about the offense than maybe a lot of the coaching staff did at the time. I was obviously the coaches that didn't come over from Penn State.
Yeah.
I was able to. I'd been in the system for at that point 3 years, where these guys have been in for one. So it was a good transition. It was good for me. It made it easy for me because, I mean, I don't care how smart you are. It's difficult to go from one system to another. So it was, and especially when you only had one season. You had one season to make it right. That one, it made the most sense to me, and I still think that it was the best decision.
What's that like going to a place knowing that you're only going to be there for 1 year? Like, how much effort do you put into, like doing things that like normal college kids would do, like exploring Starkville? Like do you pretty much just like keep your laser focus on like, I'm here to play football. Let's figure that side out of it? Or like, what's that like?
Well, I definitely had more of a social life at Penn State. But I think a lot of that has to do with how much time I spent there as well. So
Right.
I was able to, to do some things throughout Starkville, but much, much smaller college town. Great. I mean, it's a cool college town. I liked it, but it was a little bit different than what I was used to. And I was there for a job, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of, what I was there for. And, I enjoyed my time in Starkville. It was, like I said, it was a little different. And then, being banged up a lot of the year wasn't great for me, obviously. And, may or may have not have, I don't want to say, I mean, I didn't have a bad experience there by any means, but it could have been a lot better if I would have been healthy, obviously. So,
Yeah.
But I mean, it was interesting. Obviously, going there and trying to earn the respect of my teammates. That obviously these guys kind of came in together, and they were great, man. They were great to me. They welcomed me with open arms. They felt strongly enough about me. They voted me a captain, which was really cool. So I was able to, I don't know if I was ever put um, down as a captain at Penn State, but I would have been the captain if I would have stayed. So,
Right.
and I'd kind of earned that, I guess, in that spring. So I'm gonna go ahead and consider it, like being able to be a captain there at Penn State in the Big Ten East, and then a captain in the SEC West at Mississippi State was really really cool to me. And two different set of teams, different guys. A lot of different relationships that I was able to create. And, I'm thankful for my college experience, man. I got to play pretty much everywhere. Everywhere I went, and at least in the Big Ten, I seen every stadium because I traveled to every game. Even my freshman year, I always traveled, so I seen every stadium besides Wisconsin and Nebraska because we never went there. They both came to us, and
Mm.
so um, and then was able to we traveled to A&M. We played at Tennessee. We played where else did we play? There we played at Auburn. A lot of cool places, a lot of cool stadiums. And we played against LSU the year they won the Natty. Played against Bama. All these teams were, Bama and LSU were both on our side of the division. So it was cool, man. It was cool to play against all those guys. A lot of guys, are on TV now playing in the NFL that I was able to play against, and
Yeah.
it's really cool.
So aside from home games, Penn State, Mississippi State, what was your let's go with it. Where was your favorite place to play at?
Oh, Penn State. It's inevitable. It was so much unlike any other place, in my opinion, that we ever played. And maybe I'm biased, I don't know, but it was. I mean, it's the ultimate home field advantage. I've never been anywhere and played in a game where the ground was actually shaking, and when we blocked the field goal and Grant
Yeah.
Haley picked it up, I mean, it was so loud, the ground was actually shaking. I'll never forget that. And so that was cool. As far as playing on the road, um, I got sacked on the first third down of the game against Auburn, and it was really, really loud, really, really loud. And so that was a cool place. A&M, Texas A&M, reminded me a lot of Penn State
Yeah.
with the way that it was structured and the way that the stadium looked. And they didn't fill it up, and it wasn't as loud, but it was still a really cool stadium. It reminded me of like a newer version of what Beaver Stadium is, and so
Checks out. Yeah.
it was a nice place, man. Really really nice place. Kyle Field, beautiful beautiful stadium. So um, yeah, I mean, man, I was so lucky. I was so lucky to be able to play at all these places that I grew up watching. Man, it's sometimes it doesn't feel real.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would venture that there's not many people that wouldn't be willing to trade places with what you got to experience. You got to do some really
No
cool
doubt.
stuff.
No doubt, man. And I'm a product of my environment, man. I was, you know, I got lucky in a way. I got lucky in a way to be able to go to a place like Penn State and kind of develop for a year and a half, and kind of you know emerge the way that I did with a lot of my teammates. We were special, man. Had a special team, special leadership, and a lot of the guys that were in the class above me that were Trace's class. A lot of those guys, you know, it was weird because I felt a part of their class in a weird way too, because I early enrolled,
Yeah.
so for the first semester of my college experience, that was my class. You know what I mean? Because it was just me and Sterling Jenkins were the only early enrollees, and so I felt a good connection to those guys. And then obviously my class, with we've between those two classes, man, we've got a lot of guys that are still playing in the NFL, and guys that were a year younger than me. So 2016 class, a lot of guys from that class as well. So I obviously felt the closest between those three groups, or those three classes, and A lot of talented football players, man. A lot of talented football players.
That's interesting. That's something I hadn't really thought about before. Like as far as just like the social aspect of being a college kid. Do you feel like guys more tend to like typically hang around the guys that are in that class with them, or do the lines just get pretty blurred once you're all there?
I think first it starts with your position group.
Hmm.
I would say that it starts with your position group, and then your side of the ball, offense or defense. I think that that's usually where most people, because I mean, obviously you have your meetings,
Yeah.
you have position meetings, team meetings, group meetings between the offense and defense. So, you spend the most time with those guys. So obviously, I mean, it's usual for you to become closer to those people, right? So, unless you were in a situation where, let's say that your roommate possibly played safety, you know what I
Sure.
mean? Like I said, I room with Sterling who played tackle, but eventually moved into a place with Mike Gesicki and Nick Scott, who was previously on offense, um, transitioned into safety, which I would say worked out pretty well for him.
I'd say so. Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. So, and then like Saeed Blacknall too. So got really, really close with them. Adam Brenneman lived there before Nick Scott moved in. So once Brenneman moved out, Nick Scott moved in. So we held that down for a little while, the old Nittany Apartments. So
What a place.
man, yeah, 30, see, would have been 3205, 3205. That was an awesome place. It was an awesome place. I wonder if they've ever renovated those places.
Oh
If
man,
they're
I don't
still the
know.
same, because I felt like there was a lot of old bottles. You know how college kids get, man. They'll put bottles like it's a trophy case. Like, I remember I felt like those bottles had been there for 10 years.
Oh man, yeah. I'd like to optimistically think they've been updated, but who knows? I mean
We'll see.
they've updated a bunch of East halls, so anything's
Yeah, I don't
possible.
even I don't even think that they stay over there anymore, man. That's East has become the new Beaver Hall, which is where all the freshmen were. I
Yeah,
never stayed there, luckily, because they're early enrolled. But they, I would make frequent visits over there to hang out with some of the guys on the seventh floor, and I was like, man, I'm glad that I don't live here. There's no air conditioning, and yeah, yeah, I was lucky.
yeah. I lived on the first floor of Sproul in East, and
Mm,
my wife's father also lived in that same building. And I remember like right before we left Penn State, they swung by, and he looked out. He's like, they have not changed a single thing about this building since we were in school.
yeah,
I
yeah.
believe
I'm
it.
pretty sure East is like all brand new now,
I
from what
think
I've
so,
heard. Like,
or
it
at least
seems like
almost
it's
all brand new. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
yeah. I remember me and Mike would go over there. We'd go over to East and eat all the time.
that was the one thing. That was the one thing East did right. I mean, East was a good time. I won't say it wasn't, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The pizza over there was crazy. Love the pizza over there.
so moving on to your NFL time. So kind of like your recruitment and kind of like your transfer decisions, like your NFL career, like before it even started on a pretty interesting note. Like, and please correct me if anything, because this is all, this is just what I read. So tell me if I'm wrong here. New Orleans and Carolina both wanted you as an undrafted free
Oh,
agent. And
oh,
when New Orleans found out that you wanted to go to Carolina, which I'm assuming probably had something to do with Joe Brady, maybe, um,
yep.
they swooped in back into the seventh round to take you. Is that story all accurate?
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of how it went down, man.
Interesting.
It was interesting. I didn't know that they could do that, honestly. So basically, what had happened was I talked to Carolina like every other day, right?
Okay.
Because everything was virtual. You couldn't really do anything. You couldn't do the fly out visits, stuff like that, because it's all during COVID. So, um, I'm on voice calls, like I said, every other day with these guys, and mostly, I talked to, I don't know, like a handful of teams, probably like 8 teams, right? Talked to a few of those, and there's like one or two calls maybe before the draft. Most of them probably like two, right?
Mhm.
But I was talking to Carolina a lot, and kind of just like seeing how they did things. And I mean, I wasn't given like their playbook or anything like that, but I was feeling really good about what was going to be my role there, or at least my, what they saw me doing, right? And so they, it gets to the point where it's, day 3, which, I didn't even expect to be drafted, honestly, given, the way that my senior year ended up. And I played good ball, but was banged up a lot of the year. And
Mm.
so, and not being able to test at a pro day, because man, it's my pro day numbers were legit, and I know that a lot of people weren't doing it like that, but I know if I would have tested like that at a pro day, it would have shot my draft stock up. So
Yeah.
kind of sucked that I wasn't able to do that, but it's whatever. But yeah, I remember I'm sitting on the couch and I had like a little, get together with family friends and, my buddies from high school, stuff like that. Anybody that was close. We had a probably a house full of like 15, 20 people, which was, extremely frowned upon then, but this is what we were going to do. We didn't really care.
Yeah.
And, we, we get, I get a call from a Texas area code, right? I didn't talk to the Texans, didn't talk to the Cowboys. So I'm like, Texas, who's calling me from Texas? And it's Sean Payton.
Oh, wow.
And so this is like the 6th round, right? I've never talked. Sean was never on the meeting, so I've never talked to Sean.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Time is Sean Payton," and I'm like, "Holy shit, this is crazy, right?" And so everyone in the house thinks I'm getting drafted at this point. And so like I'm talking to him, he's like, "Hey, and I'd gotten a similar call from, a different team. And this was like the 3rd or 4th round when they were out of picks, right? And I kind of told them, I was like, look, like, I talked to you guys one time. I don't think that, I think that I'm going to end up if it gets to the point, I'm going to sign with Carolina. That's what I told him. And so we get down, it's like I said, like the 6th round, and Carolina had like 8, 9 picks in this draft, and they drafted all defensive players because they needed a lot of help on defense, right? And got to the point where it was, like I said, right around that 6th round where they were going to make their last pick because they had a pick in the 6th or 7th. I can't remember. I think they had like 2 picks in the 6th, maybe. I can't remember. And so I'm on the phone with Sean Payton when the Panthers are making their pick, and so I'm kind of freaking out. Like if they told me if they could, they were going to draft me late in the draft, but I'm sure they're probably just telling me that because they knew that I was going to sign with them regardless. So, Sean's like, "Hey, we want to bring you as an undrafted free agent." I'm like, "Hey, I appreciate it, coach, but I think that I'm going to sign with Carolina." And so I don't know what gave me the courage to be able to say that to Sean Payton, but it was not easy. And especially this is the first time talking to him, you know what I mean? So I tell him that, and he's like, "Okay, well, I want to make some calls. I'm going to give you a call back or whatever." So immediately I call my agent. I'm like, "Yo, like Sean Payton just called me. Like, this is crazy." He's like, "All right, man, it's cool. Like, don't answer the phone anymore." I'm like, "What? What do you mean?" And he's like, "I'm going to handle it. Like, if he calls you, don't answer." So I'm like, "Okay." So a couple minutes go by. He calls me back. And I'm like, fuck, I'm just sitting there looking at it, right? So, like, like your phone rings or whatever, you can hit like the side, like a little side button. You can hit it and it'll like stop vibrating. I'm just sitting here looking at it in my hand. It's ringing. So I'm like, fuck. And so goes to the ring or goes to the voicemail or whatever. Calls me a second time. So I'm like, dude, like this is, and like everybody's watching, right? And so everybody's like, pick up the phone. I'm like, I can't. Like my agent told me not to. So he goes to voicemail again. He calls me a 3rd time. I'm like, dude, fuck this. I'm answering it, right? So I answer it, and his demeanor completely changed. He went from like recruiting me basically to telling me, and he was like, "Look, like I'm gonna, we think that this is a better opportunity for you, whatever." And I call my agent and tell him what he said. He's like, "Yeah, like I got Carolina on the line. Like they're gonna like match it or whatever. Like they're just like talking. Basically, it was a bidding war, dude, and." Which is extremely frowned upon, but I would never say that I was the only person that this has ever happened to, right?
Sure, of course.
And so, yeah, and so it got to the point where I guess New Orleans felt like they were not going to win this bidding war, so they traded back into the draft, which again I didn't know that they could do. I'll never forget. I'm on the phone with. I get a call from a New Orleans area code now this time. So I'm like, okay, like it's probably somebody within the organization. I would imagine it's Mickey Loomis, the GM. And so I'm like, oh my god, like holy shit. And he's like, hey, I'm gonna merge the call with Coach Payton. And so he's like, look, Tommy, like I called you the first time I was asking you to come to New Orleans, but this time I'm telling you. And so like in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, are you gonna like come kidnap me? Like, what? I don't understand. And he's like, well, we're gonna trade back into the draft and we're gonna take you. And I'm just like, I didn't know that you could do that. You know what I mean? So crazy story. Obviously, I mean, it was cool. I ended up losing money out of it, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Just because, because draft spots are slotted.
Right.
But I mean, man, like I wouldn't trade the money for that story with a lot of my friends and family there. I mean, it was sweet, man. It was really cool. So another very fortunate event in my football career.
That's awesome. See, that story is way better than what I would read from like Daniel Jeremiah or someone
Oh
on
yeah,
NFL.com. Yeah, see,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah. Well, I don't know if I've ever told that story. So
That's awesome.
I don't think I can get in any trouble for it anymore. But
Nah.
But yeah, they ended up doing a full investigation on it and everything. Nobody ended up getting in any trouble for it, I don't think. So,
Wow.
you
That's
know,
wild.
yeah, or maybe they did. I can't remember. But I mean, it was really funny because they draft me and then they cut me and I go right to New Orleans or
Right.
right to
Yeah,
Carolina.
that's the
So
best part of it
it
all. Yeah.
was, yeah, yeah. It's like right when because I mean I was playing tight end strictly in New Orleans and I was miserable. Like I hated playing tight end. It was the
Yeah.
worst. And trying to block Cam Jordan every day. I've never blocked anybody. You know what I mean? It's never made sense to me because all anybody ever said was like, "Yeah, we like you, but we don't have enough film on you as a quarterback." I'm like, "That's great, but what film of me playing tight end do you have?"
Right.
Like, I don't. Now I'll run like jet sweep. I mean, I've done that, but I don't see tight ends doing that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I'm not cross lift blocking DNs. So it never made sense to me, but I get to Carolina, get back with Joe Brady, end up playing a little bit of quarterback in the last game. So it was against the Saints, ironically enough. So it was a pretty cool deal.
It all comes full circle. They must have seen the one who was against
Sure does.
Northwestern, that one pass you were lined up in the slot. I think it was against
Yeah,
Northwestern, maybe. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I was out of the backfield. I was out of the backfield. I came out of the
Oh,
backfield
okay.
because a few plays before that we ran like a power sucker type read with what I don't know if it was Saquon or Miles, but Trace hands it to Say. I'm blocking the perimeter, so we show up in the same shell. Trace is here, Say, and then me, and then we kind of do like the same type deal. And then that time I just bluffed and. Um, Trace made it about as hard on me as he possibly could have because he throws the ball behind me. And so I still give him a hard time about that one. But, luckily it worked out. He was just putting it on me.
How
So,
often do you talk to Trace still?
occasionally, I mean, I wouldn't say that there's any set time. I mean, talked to him a couple weeks ago, I'd say. So, I mean, probably at least once, twice a month, I'd say.
Yeah.
Just whenever. Like we still have a pretty big group chat with, with some of the coaches that were in, Joe, some of the guys that were in the room, because all these guys are coaching in different places now, and me and Trace are still playing. So,
Yeah.
and I think at Cliff's and a couple of them too. So, it's it's a pretty cool deal, man, because Cliff and Will Levis would have been there. I would have never been there with, I don't know who would have, I guess neither of those two are there. Michael Johnson and
And
I'm blanking
Taquan Roberson.
on, yeah. And so I was there one semester with both of them.
Okay.
And I still took us at Taquan tore his knee this year, so I reached out to him.
Yeah.
I talked to Mike every now and again, but still pretty close with Trace, with Will, with Sean, and Billy. I still talk to those guys the most, I would say.
Yeah. If you almost ended up in Kentucky, you could have been the original Will Levis then. Yeah.
Yeah, it's working out pretty well for him, huh?
Yeah.
He's playing pretty good ball. I actually had his game because they played Mississippi State this weekend, so I actually had that game on here. I was watching it. So dude's taking a beating. I know how that SEC schedule is, man. He had the finger, he's got like a toe, and now I think he has an AC separation, which is exactly what I did. So
Yeah.
that's at least what it looked like. It looked like that, or if it would have been a collarbone, I would imagine he wouldn't have came back into the game. So
Yeah. He's earning it. He's doing his job.
Been there.
Yeah.
Been there.
So let's talk about now. So now you're a Calgary Stampeder. Stampeder sounds like that's a weird singular form of that.
Yeah.
So just kind of like what led you. So I first question one, was it hard to, walk away from the NFL for now, and make that decision to go up to the CFL?
No, it wasn't hard. I mean, obviously the money was really good. So I mean that makes it a little bit tougher, but I mean, I've never played this game for money anyway, so
Sure.
I wanted to play quarterback, man. That's what got me here. That's what has given me the opportunity to play at such a high level, was playing quarterback, not tight end. So nobody in the league was really giving me a chance to play quarterback, and so the Stampeders and, like I said, the Montreal Alouettes, if you've heard of them, they were willing to give me a chance to play quarterback, and so that's kind of what led me to the league up north. They it's a unique game, man. There's some rule changes that are a little bit different than American football. The biggest ones probably, there's three downs instead of four. 12 players on the field instead of 11. The field's bigger, longer. The upright is right at the goal line. End zones are 20 yards. So, I mean, those are probably the biggest differences. There's a lot of like small rugby concepts that are involved in the Canadian game. The waggle motion, guys running towards the line of
Mm.
scrimmage. Um, yeah, I mean, you can really have, uh, you know, I'd say probably how many receivers? Three, five receivers at one time, both of those guys on the ball. So, seven guys have to be on the ball,
Okay.
right? But everybody else can be moving at the same time. They can be running in circles if they want. It can get really, really confusing. So,
That's crazy.
it's unique. It's unique, and believe it or not, adding an extra defender changes everything. So all the coverages that I've ever known are a lot different now, and it took me some time to kind of start seeing it in a similar way.
Yeah.
Honestly, like looking at it now, I wish I could have done this first and then went to American football, because like whenever I turn on a game, like a college game or an NFL game, like seeing things is so much easier. Like seeing
Interesting.
just like the structure of the defense and being able to tell like um, you know, who is possibly blitzing, who can, mess up a protection, who can get you in trouble, basically, you know what I mean? Like those type of things, like it's so much easier to see. And so, which I'd never really thought about before. Um,
That's really
so
interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's a cool league, man. It's a cool league. And, I think a lot of, Americans or just NFL fans kind of look down on the CFL like it's not as good. I mean, there are some really good football players over here, and it's a little bit of a different game, but I'm a little surprised how I figured it would be more popular, I guess, in the States to at least watch. I mean, because I don't ever really remember watching CFL games, and I mean, maybe that has something to do with the cable
yeah.
rights to it. I don't know, but I figured it would be a lot more popular just because it's such a cool game, man. It's a really, really cool game to watch, to learn about. Like, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it a lot so far in my first season here, and looking forward to being back again after the season's over.
I would guess that it probably boils down mostly to just like, yeah, like availability, like how do you watch it on TV? Because like, I mean, Penn State fans are gonna like when they started up the AFL and Hackenberg was playing the AFL, like every Penn State fan was watching him play.
Oh
Like
yeah,
and fans would love to be watching you play. I'm not sure I know how to watch CFL,
yeah,
honestly, like
yeah.
where I would find
So
it.
it's there's an affiliate basically through ESPN. It's called TSN. That's the
Okay.
Canadian
Yeah, yeah.
sports network here. So TSN does all of our games, and I believe if you have like ESPN Plus, I mean that's how my people watch the game back home,
Mhm.
because they can't make it up here a whole lot because it's so far. But ESPN Plus has I guess the option to watch our games. I'm not sure if I mean this was like last year when I was trying to watch games
Yeah.
there at the end of the season when I figured it out. So I mean I'm sure if there's a will, there's a way, right?
Yeah, say that's good to know. That was one of my parting questions here was gonna be like, how can we actually watch you play football again? But that's good
Yeah.
to know. Um, when you were going over the differences between the two games, the goalpost thing is one that always. I mean, obviously it stands out the most because it's the most jarring difference when you watch it on TV. For someone like you though, who has obviously like a aspect of your game that could be so effective is being able to just go up the middle because you're such a big dude. Like, is that like nerve wracking to go into the end zone when you know the goalposts right there?
So in our game this past weekend, actually, we had like this play where it's basically quarterback sneak, right? And um, I mean, we're on the one, like right in the middle of the field, and I'm going sneak left, and so I had a minor thought, like, man, I could like really, like, it's actually a joke, like people will say, and America. Like, you score a touchdown, you hit your head off the goalpost, right? Like that's just kind of like one of those things that people say. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, man, like I might actually hit my head on the goalpost here. Like, but no, I mean, honestly, I figured that it would be used more in
Oh,
like
true.
pass concepts. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I figured that that would be like a thing. Like I remember we had a guy in practice run into it not too long ago, and it was just really, really funny for everybody besides him. But I mean, obviously it can kind of sneak up on you. I mean, I've never had any issues with it. I don't think that there's any kind of fine policy here in the CFL as far as like dunking the goalpost,
Mm.
but it's probably because it's not in the end zone, the play's not over yet. You know what I mean? So
Oh, yeah.
you don't really run into that problem here. But yeah, it I've never, knock on wood, I haven't had any run-ins literally with the goalpost yet. So
That's good. That's good. Um, Kind of like long term, thinking about your football career, like, do you see yourself if you get the right opportunity? Would you come back to the NFL, or are you happy where you are? You're cool with staying up there and playing in the CFL? Like, no, like,
yeah,
would you
no, I
consider it?
mean it's obviously everything's situational, right? Like it just would have to depend on what's going on in my life at that time and if it makes sense. Obviously, I mean, it's the NFL is the best league, and there's no shame in saying that. I mean, it's the highest level of football, right? And
Sure.
so, if that opportunity comes back, then yeah, sure. But I mean, I've done that, I've lived that, and um, if I don't make it back to the NFL, I wouldn't be like I'm not playing in the CFL to get back to the NFL, if that makes sense. Like
Right.
I'm playing because I love football. It's never been about money to me, and this is the highest level of football that I'm capable of playing right now. So I'm very thankful that I'm in the league and I've got a role here. I mean, there's actually truly a short yardage QB role here in the CFL. I mean, because there's only three downs, like I said, and
Hmm.
so those you get down to second short, third and short. Another big rule in the CFL is you have to give a yard if you're on defense. You have to give a yard of space, right?
Hmm.
And so um, that helps with running those type of plays. And
Yeah.
so, um, I've enjoyed my role here. We've been very successful with it thus far. We've converted on every single opportunity that we've been given. I've been able to rack up like I think 8 touchdowns to this point in this season, so it's like tied for like fourth in the league, I believe.
It's awesome.
It's actually really fun. It's really funny. Like we've got our running back is like the leader as far as like running backs go and actual like rushing touchdowns. You know what I mean? He's
Uh-huh.
got 9, and I've got 8 being the touchdown vulture. You know what I mean? So, but like the number one, number two guys in the league are both quarterbacks, short yardage, same role as me. And then Kadeem, I believe, is in second. There's another guy, um, the guy that we're playing this week, the starting quarterback in Sask. Me and him are tied, I believe, something like that. Not really sure, but yeah, it's a beneficial position for me that I've enjoyed, and hopefully we continue to expand off of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Well, make sure, fan, we're not done yet. This isn't me signing off yet, but if you make sure you tune in ESPN Plus so you can see Tommy play, because that's something I've been meaning to figure out how I can do. So I'm glad I know how to do that now, because
Yeah,
that sounds awesome.
it's a cool deal, man.
Um,
It's a coal game.
so to flip it back now, just to kind of close out here, this year's Penn State team. I know we talked a little bit before we started that you've had the opportunity to watch them a couple times, but you also you play on Saturdays with Calgary now, so it makes it a little tough at times. So I don't want to go too deep into it or anything, but there's a lot of Penn State fans right now that are less than pleased after this recent game against Michigan, and just things offensively just kind of seem to be in a little bit of disarray. But something that we've talked about a lot over the last couple of years, and I'm curious to get your opinion on as a former quarterback. So Sean Clifford has been the constant for the last 6 years, 5 years now, feels like 18 years. But during his time, he had Ricky Ronnie was his offensive coordinator for 2 years. And
Right.
then they brought in Kirk Shiraka for a year. And now they have Mike Yursich going into his second year. What's it like as a quarterback? And not that you didn't really have to experience this as much. You had a little bit of it, but you had Joe Moorhead for 2 years,
Right.
what kind of a
3 if you count the last year.
yeah, even then. So what kind of effect do you think, like as a current quarterback, but as a former college quarterback, what kind of effect do you think it has, on a team just going through that much coaching turnover just constantly?
Yeah, there's a lot of turnover with it, man. Like it's tough because, guys will come in and want to implement their system. And I don't really know how they've been doing it at Penn State. I really don't. Um, but they come in kind of like implement their style of offense and how they want to coach it. And, you never really get comfortable. So that's something that I felt for Cliff for in a lot of different ways, just because it's constantly changing for him, right? But the older you get, the more, I guess, I mean, I've had to play in a lot of different systems, obviously, with all the places that I've been the last couple of years. The older you get, and maybe the more that kind of bounce around, you realize, like, okay, like this is just kind of how it goes, and you kind of adapt to it, right? So, it's tough. It's tough for a college kid, but it's I think everything looks better, obviously, when you're winning, and so that's kind of what's given it the microscope, I would say.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are focusing on I guess things, and I'm pretty far detached from the situation. I mean, I haven't really been keeping up with a ton of the stuff, but I have noticed that a lot of people do give Sean a lot of you know negative. People want to win. Penn State people want to win. I mean, it's going to be like that today, tomorrow, forever. Just like it was, yesterday and
Yeah.
since the beginning of time, right? So, if you're not winning, there's obviously an issue, and that's what really gets what guys want to win. People want to win, and unfortunately, right now, I think that they're kind of in a I don't really want to speak on something that I don't know a whole lot about, obviously, and make it seem like I've been analyzing Penn State football because I haven't. But um, man, we had some really really good teams back in 16 that kind of I would say erupted. I think that we were a lot better than what we were supposed to be, right?
Definitely.
Post sanction, Penn State team that just kind of got back to full. They say full strength, right? But we get back to having all of our scholarships and haven't been ranked in a long time, and we kind of emerged very very quickly, right? And so that wasn't really how it was supposed to go. So
Right.
I don't want to say rebuild. Penn State's always going to be of national prevalence. That's always going to be, they're going to have no reason not to be able to recruit very well, which from what I've seen, they've still been able to continue to recruit well.
Yep.
As long as James there, they'll always recruit well, in my opinion, because that's kind of his knack. He's very very good at recruiting, but um, they'll continue to just keep climbing. That's really what it comes down to, man. I think when a lot of people look back on Cliff's career as a Penn State quarterback, I would hope that they give him more credit than what I've seen the last couple of years with people kind of calling for his head. You know what I mean? Because Cliff's done a lot, man. Cliff's done a lot. He stepped into impossible shoes to fill. I would say with Trace being the guy that he was and resetting all the records and stuff like that. I mean, that had to have been tough on him.
Yeah.
And I remember, when we were competing for the job or whatever, I remember thinking, okay, like we got some pretty unreal expectations here, but I don't see Cliff being a guy that's paid too much attention to what people say. I mean, knowing Cliff very well, I've known Cliff since I was in high school. Knowing the type of guy he is, the type of character he has, it's never going to change his day-to-day process, which a lot of guys will. It's not good for a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really do hope that people will realize what Cliff has done for the program. Whether it's soon, I hope they appreciate Sean while they have him, because he was a huge piece to their success over the last 15 years or however long he's been at Penn State. So he's he's a good dude, man. He's a good dude, and I'm not just saying that because I'm his friend. He's a really good quarterback too. So hopefully, people will realize that and continue. Because I mean, they're going to get plenty of time, and that's again, I'm kind of probably blabbering on here. I think that the Aller kid's going to be special, man. I
Yeah.
think he's going to be a really good player. I mean, obviously, based on the things that I've seen, he doesn't look like a true freshman that was playing high school football last year, from what I've seen, and he. Penn State fans will have plenty of time to cheer him on, and if that does happen, and Aller takes over, and I mean, it's always going to be what's best for the program, right?
Sure.
It shouldn't be about like who's, you know, well liked or whatever. Like if Aller gives him a better chance to win, then let him play. But I would imagine that there's still a lot of young man to him, still learning behind Cliff, and hopefully, if I know Cliff as well as I think I do, he's mentoring Drew and then helping him take the pieces to be able to step up whenever it's his time.
Look at you. You sound like a seasoned vet now talking about the young man, Drew Aller.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's weird seeing, like, he's 1 year older than my little brother. So it's weird to kind of like look at it from one side, look at him as, okay, like this kid's the future of Penn State, like, whatever you want to say about him, right? I mean, obviously the kid's very, very talented. I think he was he the best rated quarterback coming out?
It depends where you were looking. Yeah.
But I mean, in the conversation, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, looking at that and then looking at like a high school kid, the way that I look at like my brother, you know what I mean? It's kind of weird to think about them being only 1 year apart. So, I mean, the kid's still young, man. He's still young and has a lot of room to grow, but I'm excited for him. I don't know if I've ever talked to Drew, but I'm excited for his future, man. Excited for him and the things that he's going to be able to do. I think it's really cool that he came to Penn State, especially given I'm sure he had every offer that you can imagine. So I'm glad that he's a Nittany Lion, and excited to see what he can do whenever that time comes.
Yeah, he should be a good one. But yeah, to your point about Clifford, yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that we've talked about actually as a blog, podcast, whatever. We've talked about how those 2016, those 2017 teams, like you guys 100% arrived early. Like you were not supposed to be as good as you were. And it was just like the confluence of, like 15, 16 NFL dudes all just peaking at the same time. And it, like you said, like it was already going to be tough enough for Clifford to take over for Trace McSorley. But then when you add on the fact that like expectations had been completely rewritten, when in reality, like you look at what he's done, like he led an 11-win team. Like they have, I know they had a tough year, 2021 and 2020. I'm just throwing out the window. It's so weird. Like it's hard to really put anything into
it's a weird deal. Yeah.
But you guys not for worse, because 2016, 2017 were awesome, but you definitely made it tougher on the guys that came after you for sure. But I think in the end, like people, I'm also choosing to believe that people will recognize and realize how impactful and good Sean Clifford has been for the program for sure. I mean, he's rewritten the record books.
Yeah. He's stepped into those unrealistic expectations, and I mean, I would say that he's played very, very good ball. I mean, no matter what they'll say. I mean, of course they're gonna rip him on Twitter, but who cares what the no-name person on Twitter says, right? I mean, you can look up anybody's name, and there's probably somebody saying anything bad about him. So
sure, yeah. Well, Tommy, this was an absolute pleasure, man. It's been great to catch up with you after 8 years ago was the last time we talked, I guess. But yeah, huge thanks for coming on. Maybe we can do this again sometime if you got some free time up there. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how much there is to do in Calgary. It looks like a beautiful town, but if you ever feel like hopping back on, you're always more than welcome.
Man.
Reminder for everyone, if you want to watch Tommy play, check out ESPN Plus, and I'll figure out the best way to do it. I'll toss it in the podcast description as well and on YouTube, so we can get some direct links to see him play, see the former Penn State great play. But yeah, Tommy, once again, awesome to have you. Thanks for coming on. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, whatever podcast platform you choose to listen to. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, all that jazz, 5-star review, comments, all that good stuff. But for myself, Nick Pollock, for my wonderful guest, Tommy Stevens, thanks for listening, everyone. Go State.